A lot of folks have been asking, do the world really need another adaptation of Roald Dahl's 1964 classic, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? Well, if you look at the box office right now, the answer is perhaps yes. And that seems to be the case for Wonka, starring Timothée Chalamet. And this movie could easily leg out to be a bit more of a Christmas surprise in 2023 than a lot of people are expecting right now. Let's talk about it. Renegade Online. Another great day here at Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today, and join us every Sunday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern right here for the live show. Just a couple of days ago, Deadline Magazine's Anthony D'Alessandro and Nancy Tartaglione, covering the domestic and international box office respectively, we're expecting this staggered release film to actually do something special this weekend. Warner Brothers' Christmas Conquer commences with Wonka this weekend, a sweet $75 million worldwide frame in store. And this morning, it looks like Wonka is going to be straddling that over-under of $40 million that was expected, around at least as much for its opening weekend. Right now tracking at $39 million, but of course, this is still just Sunday estimates. This number could easily pop over the $40 million threshold that they were hoping for. And after opening last weekend in several international major markets, this movie is continuing to roll out across the globe, adding another slate of international markets starting this weekend. So after the first 10 days, we're looking at a $150 million plus hit for Wonka. From Nancy Tartaglione, in a total of 77 overseas markets, the Paul King-directed Timothée Chalamet starrer added another $53.6 million during the sophomore session. That takes the offshore cume to $112.4 million, and with domestic, lifts global haul for Wonka to $151.4 million. Among the new openers in this second weekend is France, which led the play at $5.1 million at a clear number one and beating all comps. In Australia, $4 million was the second biggest Warner Brothers opening weekend of 2023, as well as the second biggest family opening weekend of the year. Italy's $3.4 million start was also a clear number one and tracking above comps. Now let's get back to Anthony D'Alessandro's article on the domestic box office, because I think there's some very interesting tidbits in here to take note of, because we have historical references for former films of this same genre that might give us a clue as to how Wonka is going to play out. As of Sunday morning, Wonka had a very strong hold on Saturday with $14 million, just a 3% drop from Friday and Thursday previews of $14.4 million, resulting in an estimated $39 million opening. Now, granted, a first Friday of $14.4 million with Thursday previews added in is nothing to write home about, but the fact that this movie basically repeated that performance, a day and a half worth of performance on the second day, a Saturday, that's a little uncommon. Typically, we see a softening on the first Saturday from the first Friday, given the fact that that first Friday would have Thursday previews, but that's not the case here. And the big thing to consider is that we haven't even gotten into the Christmas break yet here in the U.S. Most kids are still in school, and the demographics of this film are telling a very, very clear story. That opening is slightly north of the $35.3 million start that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did back in the same mid-December slot in 2018. For family movies opening at this point, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and there's a lot of road left for Wonka, especially with 21% of K through 12 and 76% of colleges off tomorrow. That would be Monday per ComScore, rising to 66% and 93% respectively by Friday, and finally 100% of those being out of school by next week. Intelligence puts the admissions to Wonka this weekend in the U.S. at $3 million. And if you do some quick math at a $39 million domestic haul, that suggests that the average ticket price of admission for Wonka this weekend is about $13. And that would jive going with the demographics. with a lot of kids' tickets in there. Let me show you. A deep dive into Wonka demographics, and you're going to find that many are sweet on the film. Female ticket buyers under the age of 18 represented 11% of the audience and gave it an A+. And those female audience members under the age of 25, 36% of the audience gave it an A. So the young female demographic for Wonka is very strong, and that's an audience that doesn't necessarily tend to run up front and see a movie instantly the moment it comes out, especially with Christmas holidays coming around. This is a family film that's appealing to younger girls, and that's going to be a big play, most likely, or at least that's what Warner Brothers is hoping for, over the holiday frame between Christmas and New Year's. So if we look at where we are right now after the first 10 days and not even hitting the meat and potatoes, the Christmas holiday frame of this movie's run, it's already at $151 million, and that's a very strong start. And to remind folks, this is a film that was completed on a relatively small budget of only $125 million. Now, certainly there's some films out there that would come in much lower than that, and one of the comparables to Wonka did just that several years ago. We'll get to that one in a moment. But $125 million for a lot of headline actors and a big Hollywood-style, Broadway-style production that this film entails, not too shabby when you consider all the things they had to build, the costuming and everything else. And of course, that's only about half of what the Walt Disney Company would have spent to probably make the very same film. So instead of having a Disney film that needs to get to $600 or $700 million just to cover its cost floor, this film can likely do it for around $400 million bucks. And that's presuming Warner Brothers and Village Roadshow hit the mark on their production at about $125 million, and then maybe spent another $75 to $80 million on global marketing for this film. But what else is out there that could give us a clue into how Wonka could potentially leg out? Let's take a look. Released 6 years ago on almost the exact same day, The Greatest Showman back in 2017 that repped a $174 million box office domestically and a $255 million international box office for an over $400 million global box office haul. And that movie starring Hugh Jackman, Zac Efron, and Zendaya was only done for about $84 million. Again, a relatively well-controlled budget for a movie of that scale. And I want to remind folks, that movie didn't exactly blow out of the gate. Look at the first weekend, December 22nd, 2017. A full-wide release of over 3,000 screens. It only brought in about $13 million. And that movie finished up domestically at $174 million. That is one hell of a leg out. One of the big reasons that movie did as well as it did is because it was well made and it had a lot of music in it that became very popular very quickly. Audiences went back to see that movie over and over and over again, and it became a huge hit. And not only that, it wasn't just what happened in the theater, it's also what happened outside of the theater in the way of things like iTunes downloads, plays on the radio, purchasing of physical music media like CDs. That movie did a ton of business outside the theater, and it only got better once it hit physical media like Blu-rays and 4K discs and DVDs, as well as streaming rights that went after that. Now, does that mean that Wonka is going to be as popular or as big a hit and leg out as well as The Greatest Showman does? Well, it certainly could, but time will tell. And frankly, right now, we're too early in the game to really know what's going to happen with this, but there's a lot of good signs in there that this thing could overperform in the next 2 to 3 weeks, at least insofar as comparison to its opening. I think $400 million is certainly on the table for Wonka, although at this point it still seems like a long shot, and we're really not going to be able to tell until after Christmas weekend. Now, one of the things that's going to hurt it is the fact that Christmas Eve is already one of the worst days at the theater. People don't go to see movies on Christmas Eve. In fact, one of the biggest Christmas Eves for theaters that landed on a weekend was Spider-Man No Way Home. That did $19 million, which was insane. But with Christmas Eve landing on a Sunday this year, next Sunday as a matter of fact, that's going to put a little dent in the weekend performance for Wonka, but it probably should make it up in droves on Monday, Christmas Day, which, believe it or not, is actually a very popular day for movie theater going here in the U.S. And then, of course, there's that entire next week and next weekend leading into New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, we're still going to have a lot of playthrough for that week, and I expect this movie to probably get a good bit of repeat business from people that have already seen it. And if you've opened up Netflix lately, you might have noticed some new stuff in there. Matter of fact, you might have noticed a lot of Warner Brothers titles that are now licensed in to Netflix, including all of the recent DC stuff, along with a lot of others. David Zaslav and company have figured out rather quickly that they can't do it on their own just with HBO Max, especially when you have some of the budgets for some of these films that are going to come down the pike, just like we've seen with Black Adam and like we're about to see with Aquaman 2 coming out this coming weekend. So in other words, even if Wonka just rakes in around $400 million at the global box office and effectively breaks even, there's probably a check from Netflix coming several months down the line of tens of millions of dollars to get this movie onto the streaming service. Again, we keep encouraging other companies, mainly the Walt Disney Company, to start considering doing the same with their own titles because they're simply losing too much money at the box office, and Disney Plus is absolutely incapable of making that up compared to licensing to third-party companies like Netflix. So let me know if you've seen Wonka, or if you're planning to see it, or maybe planning to see it again. What do you think it's going to do at the global and domestic box office? I think this could be very interesting if it continues to be enjoyed by audiences. The other thing that I think that's going to work well for Warner Brothers here is that it's going to bring in, potentially, a whole new demographic to Dune Part 2 coming out in a few months from now, also starring Timothée Chalamet. I think the timing of these releases was brilliant, and I think Dune 2 is going to get a boost by having it move back into 2024, coming in after Wonka, because it might just create a whole new fan base that, at least nothing more, wants to go see Timothée Chalamet again. But we'll see what happens. Stay tuned right here to Valiant Renegade. Take care. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.